I am back. And more specifically, I'm back on my ARK Survival Evolved grind after not playing for almost a year. And the long and short of it was that I loaded my previous game with some of my mods not turned on, and I lost a lot of my stuff on that other save. And then ASA came out, and I really tried getting into it, but crashing so much really took the wind out of my sails. Enough babbling though, I want to build a cool base. After making the perfect ARK character, I spawned into South Zone 1 and immediately noticed this annoying black glitch line going on at the bottom of my inventory menu. And after searching for some time for a fix, I read that turning this on would fix the issue, and it did, for now at least. And I know we're several months into 2025 now, but I started recording this during December of last year, so ignore the gotcha clause. My ultimate goal was to get to Herbivore Island, which meant I wanted to get to level 16 so I could make a raft. And my plan was to run up and down the beach killing things until I got to that point. But while picking berries for subsistence, I saw this green dude, and she was only a level 9, but I didn't care. She tamed out to level 13 and I named her Goblin. And after quite a lot of Thatch Foundation crafting, I was at a high enough level to make her a saddle, and we rode out of there heading to Herbivore Island. On the way there, I got jump scared by this red lead Sictus, which I initially thought was an alpha, but it was just red because of the holiday event, so I continued onward to Herbivore Island, where I parked Goblin in the shallow part of this inlet, and while trying to make a small platform to set my stuff up on, she was attacked by these punk mantas. We handled the first one together, but the other one ran off, and while I was collecting his buddy, he came back and almost killed me.
Oh, okay, thank goodness.
Nevertheless, I set up a storage bin and campfire on my platform before going about spoiling a bunch of meat to craft some narcotic, which I was also going to need a mortar and pestle to make. So I started gathering the resources I would need, but I was rudely interrupted when I saw a goblin being attacked by a much larger goblin look-alike. And I kind of thought that was going to be a wrap for Goblin, but she survived.
Don't do it. Get away from him. Nasty. Leave him alone. You did it!
Anyway, back to the mortar and pestle. And rest in peace to the Fiumia, whose hide I sacrificed to make it. I was able to make up 13 narcotics. I, however, wasn't a high enough level to make trank arrows to tame a parasaur, so I spent the night gathering materials and killing stuff until I hit level 12, after which I made 28 trank arrows. And despite my initial goal being to tame a parasaur, I had seen this red trike while leveling the previous night, and I've always been partial to a good trike. It was pretty smooth sailing initially until this second trike decided to join the party and rock my shit a little bit. And I thought going into the water would deter it, but it simply followed me in, which was a little terrifying.
How come you can swim like that, bro? No!
It only took one more trank arrow to down the red trike I had wanted. It was only a level 16, but I could make that work. I also downed this pterodon while the trike was taming, which was only a level 2, which I can't make work, but look at his cool colors. And while I was at it, I decided to add this parasaur to the list of things I was taming. After everything finished taming, I brought them all back to base before heading out again to collect hide for saddles, where I tamed yet another level 2 pterodon because it was, once again, a neat color. I made a trike saddle and hopped on red to collect some narco berries. Red is what I've named the trike, by the way. I know not everyone possesses such formidable naming skills as me. It's okay to be jealous. I had an abundance of narcotic making now, a whole 49 buckets full, which would hopefully give me quite a few levels, and give me all the trank arrows I could ever want, so that I could tame all the creatures I could ever want. However, trank arrows tend not to work all that well, if at all, when your bow breaks mid-tame. But luckily enough, Ankies are very slow, and it really wasn't all that difficult to collect the supplies I needed to fix my bow while he chased me. I hit level 36 just in time to make an Anki saddle. I did, however, need metal to make it, so I was also going to need a forge and a smithy, which is relatively easy. It's also worth mentioning that it took me almost 4 months to get it done. Which meant that instead of the holiday event colors, we're now seeing Easter event colors. With a forge and a smithy made, I skipped making an Anki saddle for now and instead made myself better tools. After which I went out to hunt for some hides so I could make said Anki saddle. Where I also tamed this Fiumia because I knew I was going to want to set up some crop plots later. And after making my Anki saddle, I went out to collect a little bit of metal so that I could make this gun. Very cool. What was also cool was this stego I kept walking by, and I wanted to tame her, so I did. But not before wasting all my bullets shooting her friend in the face. I named her Blueberry, and it was at this point that I decided it was time to make a base. And so as I figured out exactly what I wanted to make that base out of and where I was going to build said base, I decided that making a pterodon saddle was a good place to start so that I could get an aerial view. But first I wanted this drop, which gave me a second, ever so slightly better gun. Also, I came to the obvious conclusion and decided to build my base in this little cutout area. But first I was going to need a lot more wood and stone. I also made an S+ crafting station to make crafting everything a lot easier. I started with making stone foundations to make this almost circular shape, which I planned to repeat several more times until it made one big, large circular shape. But first I needed a lot more materials, which we're not going to get into. Instead, we're going to talk about the unwanted guest who made themselves at home at my temporary base, stomping around, shaking my screen. So I did a little bit of this, and when you know it, he's gone. To be fair, I was considering doing a dino wipe anyway to get better levels spawning in, even if the Bronto stomping on my base did have a large part to play in me doing it. Either way, I finished up the foundations of what my base will be, and it wasn't perfect, but I could see the vision. What I could also see was Goblin being attacked by another Megalodon, and I'm not saying that I had a part to play in Goblin Stack, but as I was shooting the Megalodon, not all the crosshairs were red. Some of them were definitely yellow. Either way though, the Megalodon was a level 100, and Goblin was only a little guy. So I'm not so sure it really would have mattered. Either way, I was really sad about it.
Oh no. That's so sad.
But there was nothing to be done, so I went back to base building, making some wooden triangle foundations, which I used to fill the middle of my outside platforms. As I was finishing that up, though, I saw this dude swimming where Goblin would hang out, so I tamed him and named him Moss. Moss had pals hanging around the area that I also tried taming, but they kept trying to take me to deeper water, and I wasn't about to do that. So I went back to base building and finished adding all my wooden foundations, after which I tamed another pterodon as a treat. And this one was actually almost a somewhat decent level. At least he would be after getting the 23 levels from taming. I thought the next step to my base building process would be learning and making glass for the walls, maybe the roof if I was feeling zesty. However, I was gonna want an imprinted pterodon so that I could carry an actually decent amount of crystal to my base after collecting it, which is where my glass making escapades came to an end. Because after hatching this cute little guy, I couldn't actually imprint him, and I wasn't gonna even try collecting the amount of crystal I was gonna need without a somewhat decent pterodon. So wooden walls were gonna work perfectly fine in my opinion. I also added 2 gates so that my trike could come into my base, because I decided that that was something I wanted. Also, I looked away for all of 2 seconds to collect some more fiber, and there was a Bronto in the middle of my soon-to-be base. So I escorted her off the premises before she could destroy the tree that I wanted to stay in there. After which I filled in all the blank spaces I left with wooden door frames, which from what I can see is gonna look pretty good after it's finished. I did have to go through and raise all the walls by 2 so that they were the same height as the dinosaur gates, during which there was an intruder. So after body slamming him, I shot him with my gun in self-defense. I tried adding pillars as a decorative edging to my base, but the game wouldn't let me. It was just a setting I needed to change, which I took note to fix later because I wasn't going to do that right now. I wanted to add stairs on the inside of my base, which I think look very nice. And now I was ready to mess around with my settings. I didn't change anything massively, I just tweaked a few settings to make playing a single-player world more manageable, after which I loaded my world back up and continued with my base building, adding ramps for my gates on the outside. I also finally noticed that I had inverted the wood pattern on the front section of my base, so I destroyed it to rebuild it properly. I spent the rest of this night taming 2 more pterodons, because I wanted to see if I could actually imprint one now, and all the pterodons I already had weren't ready to give me another egg. And to my delight, the answer was yes, and I now had an imprinted level 69 pterodon. I took him on a little adventure away from the island in the hopes that if I unloaded the area, some of the resources would grow back, because a lack of trees was slowly becoming an issue, but my solution didn't really work. But I did find this Leicester while I was out, so it wasn't a total loss. I did really want the trees to respawn though, so I went back out and went much further this time, where I found this Spino doing devious things to this rock, but the trees still weren't back. But I did find this dodo on the beach that I brought back. So once again, not a complete loss. And despite the tree thing still being an issue, I decided to ignore it for now and hope that it works itself out while I figured out what to do with the roof of my base, which didn't really come out as much of a roof, and more so just a little bit of coverage in some areas, but it's fine. If this was any other map, I'd worry about making a proper roof, but you don't really need a roof on the island, to be honest. And with that, the bulk of my base was done and I was ready to start moving all my stuff in, starting with a feeding trough. Also, I know I said I was gonna leave it alone, but I messed with the resource respawn settings again, and finally some of the trees were back, but there was also now rocks in my base, which I wasn't actually all that mad about. I'm gonna spare you the details on moving all my stuff into the new base, because it was less moving stuff and more making new things, moving all the materials, and then breaking the old pieces. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. Once all my materials were moved, it was time to bring all my tames over, starting with the pterodons, which took forever. But that's only because I lined them up along the roof of my base, after which I had to jailbreak my Phiomia out of this rock, before breaking what was left of my starting platform and bringing the rest over. I'd also figured out the pillar issue, which I think adds a nice touch to the overall look. The next step was to add all the finishing touches to my base. The ARK running around thinks he's going to add crop plots and be finished with this build. However, I know that I also paint the whole thing, so hindsight and all that. To start with, though, I do add my crop plots and plant all the berries and veggies that are in the game, which totals up to 10 plots. I also didn't add any irrigation system, because this is the island and it rains plenty to keep them watered without one. I also spent longer than I ever want to admit to anyone feeding this virtual Phiomia stimberries so I could fertilize my crops. As a treat for being mostly done with my base, I really wanted to tame this nifty looking Anki. However, she took a swim before passing out, so that wasn't gonna happen. And as a substitute, I tamed this level 4 pink pterodon, which is a fine substitute, I suppose. I set up some S+ wall and standing torches to light my base at night, and I was really excited about how this was looking. It was, however, missing one thing, and that was a paint job. So I made a cooking pot and got to making dyes. I made pretty much all the colors, I think, but I only ended up using the forest green and black for my base. I also had to use blueberry and red to reach the ceiling so I could paint it. And after what had to have been at least an hour, I was done painting. Not that you can really get a feel for the whole look with how foggy it was. I did have 2 more non-base related things I wanted to do before ending the video though. The first being to make and paint a set of flak armor, and the second was to do something about that hair. But to make scissors I need obsidian, which means taking a trip off of Herbivore Island. Before that though, the fog had finally gone and I could actually get a look at my whole base now, which also meant that I could double check to make sure I hadn't actually missed anything, and as far as I could tell, I hadn't. So moving on to getting obsidian. And despite hoping that I could find obsidian relatively close to base, I did end up flying all the way to the volcano before I found any. That wasn't all bad though, because I collected this yellow drop which had a sweet blueprint for a set of flak boots and a pretty sweet crossbow. After making it back to base, I chopped off the hair, leaving the beard, and dyed it olive. I eventually want to get a trike skull helmet, but I need to kill an alpha rex for that, and that's probably a little ways off my to-do list. That'll be it for this video though. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did enjoy watching, maybe consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.